G'day everyone. On today's episode of The Content Couple, Ash and I are going to explore a subject that we're pretty passionate about and we believe is underappreciated, misunderstood, and even rarely applied. And that topic, my friends, is Stoicism. Yes, that almost 3,000-year-old Hellenistic school of philosophy, which is often represented by old, crusty, bearded dudes in togas standing around marble columns and talking about what virtues represent the greater good. And it's easy for us to think these days, because of the images, that they were obviously different times and that different issues were present and people thought about things differently. But if you read the Stoics, you'll notice that's not necessarily true. And a lot of the issues they struggle and the challenges they faced in thought and in action are probably even more relevant today in navigating the challenges of our modern world as they were then. And Stoicism is so multifaceted. You could look at it individually as a tool that allows you to make a distinction between your thoughts and perceptions and reality to determine what's useful and what's not. But it would be completely wrong to limit Stoicism to the perceptions of you and I individually. When I reflect on the world, I see that a majority of problems stem from individuals doing what they want based on their own ego. But when I reflect on research regarding happiness or read stories about people on their dying beds, and you will find, I suppose unsurprisingly, that these stories are filled with regret. And those regrets are far deeper than, I wish I'd bought that car or went on that trip so many years ago. And those regrets are all communicated in different ways. But at the essence, what I hear is this. Throughout the passage of time, deep in my heart, I genuinely thought, believed, and felt something which epitomizes a greater virtue, such as love. And in that moment, when it's become clear that perhaps your passage of time has come to an end, it's understandable that you'd also reflect upon, with the same stark clarity, the purpose and meaning and intent that lay dormant in your heart and that didn't emerge because you were distracted by worldly demands and desires. In an attempt to segue from that real talk and change the tone, today's episode of The Content Couple was recorded in traffic. So what would normally be a half an hour conversation turned into 50 minutes. For this reason, and in keeping with the vibe of a short, open, casual, real conversation about topics that we're passionate about, we've split this episode on Stoicism into two parts. So Ash and I hope you enjoy part one of Stoicism. And before we launch into the podcast, I will just share with you a quote from Marcus Aurelius from the book Meditations. It's time you realized that you have something in you more powerful and miraculous than the things that affect you and make you dance like a puppet. Welcome to the Content Couple podcast. Short, casual conversations about self-help, self-improvement, health, change and mindfulness.
We're a couple with a shared passion for personal development and the pursuit of knowledge.
We use our daily city commute to share with each other and you, our audience, what we have learned from audiobooks, podcasts, books and other content.
Join us as we step outside of our comfort zone and discuss what we found helpful in our quest to bring the best versions of ourselves to every day.
Where we would prefer to be recording this from the beach, please be aware we are recording this podcast in the car and you may hear the occasional sound of traffic or Ashy cursing fellow commuters.
Our hope is that you take away one thing after listening through this podcast that will help you with your own personal development journey.
Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Content Couple podcast, a podcast where we, Ash and I, just discuss what really Ash has been listening to, whether it be podcasts, audiobooks, and we really just try to, if you like, dissect those bits which we find useful and may help us to be better people and improve our lives. I'm hoping today is an incident-free podcast, given it doesn't look like it's incident-free on the road this morning, does it, Ash?
No, this is not looking good.
Ashy, what have you been listening to this morning? Or it doesn't have to be this morning, but what's on your mind that you think we should have a chat about?
Well, this morning I forced myself off the Bulletproof Radio podcast.
Oh.
I just didn't wanted this to become the Bulletproof Radio recap show.
Yeah.
And I was flicking through our Audible list, our Audible library, and one book that I have read twice, and you introduced me to this book, I think in 2016, and after the first read through I did decide it was something I wanted to read every year. So yes. I started it again, and that book is Ego is the Enemy.
Ego is the Enemy.
Ryan Holiday.
By Ryan Holiday. That is a fantastic book. And yes. Ryan's written many books.
He's got a very interesting career.
Yes. Like there's also The Obstacle is the Way, which is a great book as well, which you'd probably read more than once a year.
Yeah, that's another one I'll probably do straight after this. And then, of course, there's The Daily Stoics, so a lot of Ryan's work.
Yep.
Or a lot of the ideas that Ryan puts forward stem from his extensive reading and researching of the early philosophers like Epictetus, Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, all that gang.
The gang of Stoics.
The gang of Stoics. So an ego is the enemy doesn't necessarily focus just on them. There's, modern and olden day people that he draws on their lives and their experiences as examples.
Yeah.
He does have The Daily Stoic, which is I think one of his newer books, which is really a look at all of the works of the Stoics. So.
Yeah. Okay, Ash. Well, now, given that you've started reading that book again, do you want to share with the audience who don't know?
Yeah.
And this is the important thing, I think, about Stoicism. It's not about accurately defining it. It's really about practical use and how you feel you can use it personally. So from your perspective, how would you define Stoicism for the people in the audience?
Stoicism to me is, I don't know, like a lifestyle maybe, or I don't know. How would you it's sort of like it's living your life.
I think that's a great way of describing it.
It's living your life in a way that reflects ancient principles of self-reflection and self-awareness and humility, really.
Yes.
I think Stoicism, there is another podcast that I started listening to, and so far so good. I only listened to one episode, and he was actually interviewing Ryan Holiday. And this podcast is called The Practical Stoic. And he said something in that podcast, which I don't necessarily agree with, but he said that he felt Stoicism had the potential to develop into something such as Buddhism or Taoism. I don't necessarily agree that it's a religion.
No, I don't agree that it's a religion either.
It's certainly a set of principles by which you could quite easily adapt as a lifestyle.
I think that's an awesome, when you said lifestyle, I know it sounds simplistic to people that may be listening, but that's really the truth of it. Because, and obviously you also went on to explain it in more detail, really what the underlying principles of Stoicism are, and that humility, that practice, that discipline, that, the control of your behaviours and your thoughts.
And your ego.
And your ego, exactly. What I find is amazing about Stoicism, which I suppose continues on from your discussion of the podcast, where someone said it's akin, it could it's a movement, if you like, that could be like Taoism or Buddhism. I don't necessarily agree as well. I can see where they're coming from. I think Stoicism is not like, it's not a religious principle or...
Well, there's no worship.
There's no worship.
It's about the self.
Yes, it's about the self. And
not a higher being.
I think it's more like what we know, given our training, modern psychotherapy in a way, like on yourself.
Yes.
That's the way I think of it. I look at it as a way of viewing life. This is why lifestyle is important. It's really an attitude towards life, because stuff's going to happen to you anyway, good and bad. And what we've both come to learn in our studies over the last few years is that what's most important is not necessarily the context or the content of what happens to us as we live out our lives, but...
In fact, that's probably not important at all.
Yeah.
Really.
It's really how we respond to that and who we choose to... and how we choose to think about it, view it, and then act upon how we view it. It comes back to what we really spoke about in that. It's funny how our podcasts are kind of finding similarities, which is, kind of what we want, in that when we spoke about the epigenetic and the impact of thoughts on our physiology, really Stoicism is it's not focused on the physical. It's very much focused on being master of your self, self-actualizing, self-reflecting, as you said, and then removing those obstacles that, as you alluded to, like the way we often think isn't really that important at all. Like there's this paradoxical kind of element where content and context, what happens to us in life isn't important, but what we choose to do in life is. Yes. So, it's like that, Marcus Aurelius quote, one of the Stoics, what we do in life echoes in eternity. And where, I think people take that out of context when they quote it a lot. And it's in that Gladiator movie,
Is there?
as well. I think the core of it's true in that where Stoics didn't look upon themselves as being very important at all, what they chose to do...
Their life's work was the legacy. Yeah, that was important to them, and the way that they responded to the world and what they left behind from that response was where the importance is.
Question that I want to ask, just out of my personal curiosity, and I hope the audience is also curious as well. What captivates your attention the most about Stoicism? In particular, I suppose, Ryan Holiday's books.
I think for me, discipline is one thing about Stoicism that really draws me in, because I think we live in a world of instant gratification, and almost anything that we want really is accessible to us, especially if you're lucky enough to be in a stable socioeconomic environment and have employment and all of that. Really, like you can have whatever you want. Everything is so readily available, and I'm talking about simple things from chocolate. Like it's so easy to go and get a chocolate bar when really that's not a healthy choice, or to more grandiose things like how many people are just living in debt, but they have these fancy cars and all that sort of stuff. All the toys and cons. And I think that in a world that makes it so easy to be undisciplined, to be able to have discipline and say, no, I'm not going to have the chocolate bar, or I really want that car, but probably this lesser fancy car is a better financial decision for me. I think that's becoming more and more difficult, and it's not something that we are taught in school. I mean, I always say, do away with algebra and all that stuff and tell me how to set a budget when I'm in year 10. Tell me how the stock market works when I'm in year 10. You know what I mean?
Yes.
I just think we're thrust through this school system. You come out at 18 years of age and you really just don't have a clue how to manage yourself. And
you just have a clue on how to learn and regurgitate books.
And that's not what the real world is all about.
No.
So, yeah, I think that the way that they pervade discipline as such an underpinning important principle of Stoicism attracts me, because discipline is something that I want to be more disciplined at. I want more discipline in my life. Like, I want to...
There's nothing more discipline than discipline.
Yeah, when I don't feel like going to the gym, I want, 10 out of 10 times, maybe 9 out of 10 times to go, you know what, just go. Just go because you made the commitment and this is where you're at. And, so I think that Stoicism really gets me in that discipline area, and just the whole, self-reflection and humility.
Self-reflection's a
big one.
Oh, it's something that I even find working in the corporate environment and, adulting, that a lot of people don't have. I suppose it comes back to what you were saying earlier, that we live in this world where everyone just wants the mod cons and the cars, and they're prepared to go into real consequences, i.e. debt, in order to achieve that. And really that's the antithesis of the Stoic philosophy, because
they were minimalists and simplists.
And that's buying into a perception, because the underlying reason, and this is where Stoicism is also important, it's not necessarily what we choose to do as much as why we choose to do what we choose to do.
Yeah.
And people today choose to acquire all these goods and these, mod cons and luxuries and everything without thought of the consequences, without thought of what you're really trading for that.
Absolutely.
And I think, Stoicism thinks that anything that's based on perception is really not a noble pursuit.
Correct, yeah. And that's how I guess the book that I've loved to read, I recommend everyone read it at least once, and then once a year.
Yes.
Where the ego is the enemy, and I'm not talking ego in the Freudian sense, but
no.
But ego,
it's nothing to do with one desiring sexual relationship.
Your mum? No, not that ego, but what the book describes ego as, I'm paraphrasing, but an unhealthy belief in your own importance.
Yes.
And not to Gen Y bash, because I'm Gen Y, and not to bash any generation, because I think that across all generations there are people who have an unhealthy belief in their own importance. But I think certainly the poor generation that have grown up with the participation awards and all of that,
yes.
There's no winner, and everyone's a winner, and let's award you for just turning up and not trying hard. I think that being jolted into a bit of humility and self-awareness and self-reflection would be very, very healthy for them, because that's, again, not how the world works.
Yeah, well, I suppose if we break that down, you said before that what fascinates you a lot about, I suppose practically in your life, about Stoicism is the pursuit of discipline. And you said that the Stoics were all, they're really trying to strip away their worldly selves and be something more noble and pursue things that are more valuable, not for their ego, but for humanity, really. And it's really interesting when you think about that, because when you have in schools these days kids getting awards just for, not even really having a go, but because they showed up. How do we define, how do they come to understand what discipline is and what's noble anymore?
Look, I think that they probably need to take a few hard knocks before they, and which is really terrible. I think that we've really failed that generation, because they do go out.
Failed you, did we, Ash?
Not me. I think I escaped that.
Yeah.
I think I was on the tail end of, I was on the tail end of that participation award stuff. I think I was in the last years of high school when that all started to come in. But I really think that the generation beneath me, the school systems failed them, because, and modern, that whole way of parenting has failed them, because they do get up into the corporate world or get into their first job expecting a gold sticker on the chart because they, answered an email, and they take hard knocks. Like I've watched it in certainly in the organisation I work for. I have watched them sort of come in all very full of their own self-importance and very, feeling very sure of the degree that, because, they've got a bachelor of this or a master's of that, firmly believing that means, and I'm not talking about everyone, but firmly believing that means they need to just walk into the, the high-paying job and they shouldn't have to work for it. That's again not how the world works. And I think the way for those people to come out the other end of that thinking and that way of being in the world really requires a huge reprogramming of what they were given at school and what how they've been led to believe that the world works. And something like listening to Ego is the Enemy is a very, very good sort of starting point to start unraveling, well, maybe that's, the way I've been taught is not necessarily the only way to be in the world.
Yeah.
And I maybe have some high expectations that I need to reconsider, because the book has sort of three components. It talks about your ego in the face of, just starting out and being a young soul in the world and not really knowing everything you think you know. And then it talks about like your ego in the face of it when you start to achieve success and you start to get a few notches under your belt and all that. And then your ego in the face of failure, because we all fail. So, I think it's a book that everyone should read.
I completely agree. And to come back to that point you made earlier from that Daily Stoic podcast, I think, this is my personal opinion, that Stoicism has such a place in this modern world. It's incredible, even though we're talking about thousands of years ago when people like Seneca and Marcus Aurelius spoke about, and Epictetus were writing about their perceptions of the world and how they think and what they thought was a good way to live. If you look at those now and take off the contextual veil, if you take off the fact that they were written by people years ago in, settings, whether it was in the Roman Empire or whether it was in the Greek sort of classical era, if you strip that away, it's still massively relevant. And I recently, last year, I bought a book by Derren Brown, the famous, what would you say?
What does he call himself? Illusionist?
He's an illusionist, magician, hypnotist, a lot of those things. He's really a performer who's able to trick people's minds using these perceptions.
Yes.
Like, that's really what it's all about, right? Because everything's a perception and we're easily fooled, which is a key element of Stoicism, that we're easily blinded by, to our real purpose by the strappings of the world. But he wrote a book called Happy, where he goes into a lot of ideas on what happy is and what's the best pursuit, or what he suggests may be the best way in order to find happiness.
Yes.
And from reading that book, what I most gathered out, it's been a while since I've read it, but he believes that seeking, I suppose, purpose and actualization in Stoic philosophy is underlyingly the really only way to go in the society that we kind of live in today.
Yeah.
Yeah, I suppose to ask you, like, given we're trying to give people useful tips on how they can use the principles of Stoicism, how do you think Stoicism can lead you to living a happier life?
I think that if you follow the principles closely, it helps you to break unconscious habits or unconscious programs that may not be necessarily helpful in terms of how effective you are.
Yes.
It helps you to be more aware, or it forces you to be more aware, really, of yourself and your thinking and your responses to things, and to sit back a bit, be present, and think about, all right, well, this is how I have initially felt to respond, but who do I want to be in the world? What do I want to do in the world? And what's the best response to this to bring that about?
Yeah.
In a broad sense.
Yeah. And just to make a point, and this is going to come back to the book that you've been reading, because one thing that I wanted to ask you that I'm always wondered about Stoicism and think it's a very much a point that people miss is that given the Stoic, if you took the Stoic philosophy and sort of read about what the Stoics thought without thinking about the context for their life individually, right, what they were going through or the sufferings they were in or whether they were rich or poor or what their position was, it's easy to think that these were just poor people trying to rationalize life and kind of living like a modern hippie, almost nihilist kind of lifestyle.
Yeah.
But that's absolutely not true, because people like Seneca was one of the richest person in Rome at the time that he lived.
Yes.
That didn't mean he thought that was a great pursuit per se, but that was what he thought was his calling and the position other people were putting him in. And so he would then act within his position, pursuing Stoic principles, doing the right thing by other people, showing humility, being disciplined, which if you do those things, and this is why I think it's important to people in this modern lifestyle, where it makes you easier to cope with all the context and the crazy things this world's trying to throw at you, it also will ultimately lead you to being a more successful person, in a material sense as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
And we also have people like Marcus Aurelius, who was a Roman emperor.
Yes.
So, which I find fascinating as well. But a question I want to ask you, and this is really interesting, and it kind of comes back to organizations and context and purpose, is in The Ego as the Enemy, and referencing Marcus Aurelius, they were both people that were in a highly militarized, sort of rank structured sort of position.
Yes.
Like you've got Ulysses S. Grant in Ego and the Enemy, which they talk about a lot. And you've got, Marcus Aurelius, of course, who, was a big conqueror for the Roman Empire, somewhat. And if you read Meditations, you can learn a lot about that. But do you think that environments such as that involve rank structure and those traditional kind of militarized environment can help the Stoic philosophy, or?
I think that in principle, yes, because a rank structure automatically denotes obedience.
To a greater cause.
Yeah, sort of, you are my superior, I am your inferior, and regardless of whether I think I know better, what you're telling me to do, I will do, because you have the skills, experience, knowledge above and beyond me. But again, I think that might have been how schools worked once upon a time. And I'm not necessarily saying that that's the right way either, because I don't think that is. But I don't think in this day and age with a rank structure really works at all.
No. I agree.
The reason the military and the police, they all need it because it's make or break, really. Exactly. If you don't have that line of command or the chain of command and the systems and processes that need to be followed to a T, because they're in high risk situations. And so in that sense, it is. But I don't believe that with the development of the internet and the fact that we are now in an ideas age, we're not in being employed and having a job and making money is not all about being at the same company for your entire career or having a couple of different companies in the same
life is definitely not structured in the way.
No, and people have so much scope now to make their mark on the world or do something that is going to make them successful or be successful outside of that traditional company setup. So, which I think is, I can't remember what your question was, but I actually think that makes Stoicism even more important because...
Oh, definitely. And that my point was, like, just your thoughts on the whole, I suppose, context for Stoicism within highly structured, militarized sort of ideologies, you know what I mean? And not that I'm saying, like, I don't think I'm not saying that I condone war or military or anything like that. I'm just sort of saying in the context of thinking about Stoics, I suppose historically, like not even a few generations back, where we did have world wars, like our grandparents like both of our grandparents fought in world wars.
Yeah.
And I think that they lived in much scarier times than what we do today, as you said, where there's so much potential in this ideas world. And, you know, it's easy to make something of yourself if you have that discipline, ironically.
Yeah.
And I suppose I just think my grandfather, who, you know, was shot multiple times during World War II, I'm sure they had their internal demons they were going through, but their ability to engage with their world as I saw it when I was young, seemed to be so much better than what people today, you know, their perceptions of they focused on things that were more important, such as family and being a provider and conversations and old family values.
Yeah.
And today, like, I suppose the reason I think about it is, like, Stoicism, like, I think there's some benefit in thinking about some of the military basis for Stoicism, because I think that this stuff happens along a continuum, and bringing some of that discipline into our life, as you put it now, like into a life where it's all about ideas and not about structure.
Yeah.
Where people don't have respect for others intuitively and naturally anymore.
No.
Where in the military they're forced to have it, and then it seemed like they later on found benefit in that. Anyway, like they respected that, because I think the military, like, rank structure can create a mateship and a collective ethic that transcends our individuality if we're incapable of it. So that's really where I was sort of trying to go with that.
Yeah, and I guess when you do look at people that I know that are in policing or in the army, probably more the army than policing, but they do have a lot of discipline, and they do have very effective lives because of it. Like, and that, I'm not saying effective in that that means they're successful and make a lot of money, but I mean that they're healthy. They make good choices for themselves. They have, you know, clean and orderly environments around them. Like, and those are all parts of being an effective person in the world.
Yes.
So, I see a lot of value in that discipline, and whether you get it from just teaching yourself or following the principles of Stoicism or because you've been in the military, I think it's something lacking in this world, and we should all consider bringing it back. And the thing with discipline, and what I've found over the years is, and I always think of this as, whenever I'm like, no, I'm going to, that's it, like I need to detox from coffee, or I need to stop doing this or whatever, I think about it as my no muscle. And every time I say no, every time I think, I want to reach for that, chocolate or whatever, I think flex your no muscle.
Did you get that from anywhere?
I can't remember. Probably years. I mean, it's something that's been in my mind for probably 10 years. And
wow.
Yeah, and I always think every time I say no and deny myself, I'm flexing my no muscle and it's getting stronger. So then, the next time that I reflexively want to do something that I'm trying to stop, it's a little bit easier because my no muscle is grown a little.
Because it's a practice,
bit stronger,
Like it's like that's great. It's a great way to, I suppose, quantify the power of your decisions in a given moment, and to see, like, because when we make a decision, we often that's good for us, we'll often forget that we actually made them in the past, or we'll try to forget them usually because we, on the majority, make bad decisions. So we don't want to, rather than being regretful and beating ourselves up for those times that we more often make the bad decision, you're kind of building up a tank for all those good decisions. So you're going back and focusing on, yes, I'm building up this muscle because in the past I made this good decision and I can easily do that now.
Yes.
That's great. Hi, this is Matt, and thank you for listening to another episode of The Content Couple. Ashy and I appreciate you and appreciate that you have chosen to invest a small part of your day listening to our contribution to the podcast world. We love podcasts, understand there are thousands, and we are grateful you have chosen us. We believe nothing is more important than our time and yours, and we hope that in sharing how we acquire and apply what we learn, that you will take away something that will enrich your life. For Ashy and I, this podcast is a leap out of our comfort zone and a change to our normal everyday life. Our aim is to share and contribute, and we cannot do that without you. If you have enjoyed our experiment in self-awareness and self-esteem, we'll be very grateful if you could quickly jump on iTunes, subscribe to our tribe, and give us that 5-star ratings that will help other awesome people like you find us.